Welcome to You and Your Democracy. It's a short take civics lesson as part of our program, Where Do We Go From Here? I'm Chuck Parkinson. Each episode, we will look at the head and heart of democracy. We will explore the values and the principles that have created our American exceptionalism and examine the structures and institutions that give us the guardrails of our democratic republic. To quote Benjamin Franklin when asked in 1787 after the Constitutional Convention, "Doctor, what have we got, a republic or monarchy?" To which Franklin responded with a rejoinder at once witty and ominous, "A republic if you can keep it." So now let's take a look at what is this great American experiment, and then ask, what do we need to do to keep it? We often hear talk about American values, what actually are American values, and why and how they impact our everyday lives. I'm pleased to be joined today by Wes Brown with the Vantage Institute and South Dakota State Coordinator for We the People, the Citizen and the Constitution. Thanks for joining us today, Wes.
Hey, thanks for inviting me again, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
Let's first take a few minutes to review just what we view as American values, then take a look at the pressures on maintaining these values, and perhaps where do we go from here?
Yeah. So, when we're talking about American values, especially in American exceptionalism, there's a lot to unpack. And, I know we have a short time, but I don't think when I think of it framed in civics, I don't think you have to go much further than the preamble. And basically it says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare. So just real briefly, Chuck, when I think of, let's say, the justice and I'll lump domestic tranquility, the number one thing that comes to mind in this American system is the rule of law, that no man is above the law, and the securing of jury trials. And then the second thing I think of a lot of it is equality. And that could be, equality in the sense that we have to avoid the tyranny of majority in a government sense. And then personal liberties and individual rights, always tempered with individual responsibilities. So that's kind of the three things that I kind of look at when I'm thinking of, American values in the civics.
Well, that's a good underlie from where we are. I think it goes back to the preamble, which is, outlines, those 52 words outline pretty much who we are and how we've gotten to where we are. And it does raise a question. I was reading the other day a piece that looked at Alex de Tocqueville's book, which was Democracy in America, which he wrote in 1835 when he visited the U.S. And he was very interested in the way the United States was forming up, and was very somewhat to degree just like Franklin with an ominous report. But he said Americans have come together. They have the individualism that's there, but they come together. They have built roads, built schools together. They haven't done it separately. And the individualism is kind of we've turned to me versus we sometimes, but it is we the people. And could you just take a minute to kind of look at what one of those examples might be where we draw on the we prospect?
Sure. Well, and I think, I had a laundry list here, but one of the things I'll focus on is the pooling of resources and skills, right? And we do that, government-wise. We do that through a lot of that through taxation. So we have, that's how we build roads. That's how we build schools. That's how we start developing public service as an employment function, really, the federal government, and security. That's which goes back to providing for the common defense. So without taxes, and I think today we kind of look at that as kind of an evil word, but really that's one of the ways that we form something that kind of generates promotes the we and we the people, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the one thing we often forget is the money that the federal government, state government, local government spending is our money. And it goes there through taxes, and it's for the common good that we're dealing with. And I think we sometimes forget that those roads we drive on, those schools we go to, what would they be like if there weren't that support of everybody pooling together to provide funding for those particular examples?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I also want to talk about in promoting the general welfare, we have a strong tradition of self-governance. And as a republic, we believe strongly in free and fair elections. I think that's another way, another value that we have that really wraps in we of the people as opposed to us as individuals. And we have to balance that, I think, a lot of in a lot of different ways. Do you have any thoughts on that aspect
Well,
of it or
I think one of the things is, yes, individualism is important.
yeah,
We have individual rights, but we also have community responsibilities. And that goes back to the point you can list a whole bunch of rights and you can list a whole lot of responsibilities. But if you took care of your responsibilities as part of the community, your rights would be protected, in my mind. And I
right.
think that's one of the things that people sometimes forget about, and they're pretty uh, well sometimes have blinders on as to what those are, and forget that we're doing this as for the common good, and that's what makes the uh, the country work. And when we slip away from those sorts of things, that's when we kind of go outside the guardrails from that perspective.
Right, right. Yeah. The other point that I wanted to make, especially when it comes to personal values and individualism, you know, the number one thing I think if you asked Americans what's the number one value that we have, and that's the value of hard work and American ingenuity. And and that all promotes another value of social mobility, so that fact that we're willing to go out and think, attack a problem and tack it fiercely, that promotes that whole social mobility thing. And then the last two things I think, on an individual level, is our freedom of religion that we have here, which a lot of countries you don't have, and then our charity work that we do. So I think those individual values are also very important in the American exceptionalism.
I think that's right, and I'd like to touch a little on the charity perspective.
Yeah.
Our country provides an incredible amount of charitable contributions, and that is the undertone lying of who we are, I think, because we care for others in our community that may not be able or may come upon hard times, and they need assistance. And I think that's very, very true from that standpoint. And it goes once again to the common good, because we all, as people, if we were to sit down, no matter what our political perspectives are, if we were to sit down and talk with each other, we would find we have far much more in common that we don't.
Right. I totally agree. And that goes back to, the Great Depression and Roosevelt and the whole development of Social Security to keep, to provide a base for people that they don't fall through the cracks and find in extreme poverty. So, once again, I think people will accept Social Security as a value, but a lot of times we give lip service that it's going to be broke and all that. But, we have to maintain that, because I think that's a great value as an American country to have.
Kind of turning a little bit, there are a lot of strains
Yeah.
currently on American values. Let's take a moment and just take a look at one or two of what those strains might be.
Yeah. Well, the number one, I think, and it's kind of wrapped in, I'll just wrap a couple of them into one thing. We can talk about the erosion of checks and balances between the three branches of government: the judicial, the legislature, and the executive branch, right? And through the history, the presidential powers have increased. Lincoln with suspending habeas corpus, and then I think the War Powers Act is another way where the legislature handed over power to the president that was secured in theirs, the ability to declare war. And maybe there was, in Truman's time, there was there was this sense of we need somebody with immediate response because we had the nuclear threat of the Soviet Union. So, but maybe it's time to relook at that and rebalance where we're at. But that's definitely one of the strains, in my view, of the American exceptionalism.
Yes, I would agree 100%. I think one of the things that's important that we forget is that we have three branches of government, all equal. And the legislative branch, in my mind, having worked for it for many, many years, is the most important, because the legislative branch writes the laws that the president then carries out. If there's a problem, then the courts deal with that. But it's the legislature has gotten away and ceded, as you indicated, lots of powers to the executive. And there is not a single president that doesn't want more executive
Oh, that's inherent, right? And you want to be the president, you want the power. Executive orders, I think, is another one. And here's the thing, though, with executive orders, if the legislature, through bipartisan, how whatever the word is, they can't get things done in the legislature. And I'm sorry, I'm fumbling with my words. That's a gridlock. Yeah, there you go, legislative gridlock. Then the president has to act, and one way he does that is through executive. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And those executive orders are not a new thing. They've been around for a long time. And once again, gridlock gives more power to the executive than in the legislative branch. In my mind, needs to step back and really re-exert itself as the people's representatives.
Right. That's who we send to Washington to represent them, along with the president, but more directly, the legislative body. So that's correct.
Short takes are short takes. Do you have a few thoughts on where where do we go from here? What do you think we ought to look at?
Well, it'd be nice if we could find a way to get away from this political divide that we have, and it'll come back. I think it'll probably take some big disaster, like although we're experiencing a couple of those now, but it seems like there's so much gridlock in DC that we can't get anything done. So if we would focus on that, and and then maybe trying to find a way, and this would be very hard, but the balancing of the power, the separation of the branches of government.
Right. To really, it goes back for the legislative branch who represent us to re-exert itself, to come together to re-exert itself, because the old adage of law is if a law is passed and nobody's happy, it's probably pretty good legislation.
There you go.
That's our episode for now. I want to thank Wes Brown for sharing his expertise and thoughts with us today. And as always, our executive producer, Suzanne Stratford, and the SDPB technical staff for their creativity and hard work on this program. Thank you also to the supporters of South Dakota Public Broadcasting who make this program possible. To view previous episodes in this series, go to sdpb.org/election. If you have comments or suggestions for future episodes, send us a note at programming@sdpb.org. Until our next short take, I'm Chuck Hartz.